this lesson on beginning country blues guitar as we take a little more in-depth look at the tune Freight Train, recorded by Elizabeth Cotten. So, as you'll know, there's a lot of information on the audio component of this lesson, but I wanted to give you a DVD just to provide some visual aid where visual aid would be helpful, and so you could see left and right hand positions that are easier to show than to describe. Now, the first thing that you'll see when you just look at me sitting here with the guitar is that I don't have a thumb pick on. I've got the bare flesh on my right hand, no finger picks, no thumb picks, and personally, I don't even use fingernails on my right hand. There are a lot of great guitar players that do, and the best tone in general, if you are using nails, is to get flesh followed by fingertip, and flesh of the fingertip followed by the fingernail. That's what I meant to say. And I played like that for some time. I found that my nails, just the makeup of them is that they're too thin, and I get a thinner sound than I get with the flesh of my right hand. But experiment and see what you like best. And if you're into finger picks and thumb picks, then that's great too. But personally, I just use the thumb pick when I play Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed sort of things. When I'm doing this bag of music, it feels a little more authentic to me to just go real simple with just the flesh of my right hand. So that's that. Now, as we get into the tune, you'll see that right from measure 1, what I was talking about on the audio component is that this C chord that I'm fingering here with the G and the bass on the 6th string, I'm getting the melody up here with my pinky, and this here, the index, is what I was talking about, just leaving in place, even though this note in the melody doesn't occur until the 2nd measure. I just, from the get-go, hold down this left hand position, and this is what ensures me, like I was saying on the audio component, this is what ensures me against getting a bad sound if my right hand sort of rakes the strings upwards and brushes across the 2nd and the 3rd string. So I get instead of, which is what we don't want, as we've already talked about on the audio. So that's the first bit about that. The strum, which I was referring to on the audio, and I think that happens in measure 3. Let's see, I got the tablature right over here. Yeah, in measure 3 on beat 2. The strum that I was referring to with the right hand happens like this. Now that went by pretty quickly, so let me slow that down and show you a little bit closer. You can see my thumb is going between the 6th string and the 4th string, as it is throughout the entire piece. On the C pattern, it's that. When it goes to G, it's that with the open D string. But in measure 3, instead of just having 6th string, 4th string, on beat 2, where you see that 3rd string is indicated as an open note in the tablature, you could either be very precise and do it like this, with the thumb here and the index finger there on the 3rd string, index there, thumb there. You could play it like that. But it doesn't feel right to me, probably because it doesn't sound authentic to me. It's not uncomfortable or anything like that, but it just feels so much more precise and technical. And if there's anything that this music is not, it's not really precise and it's not really technical, which shouldn't be confused with an excuse to play it terribly sloppy. That's of course not what I'm saying. But there is a freedom and a flexibility to this music that makes way for a good amount of just being a bit less refined with it, I guess, for lack of a better descriptor there. So here's where on beat 2 I'm striking the 4th string with my thumb and then just raking downward or brushing through, whatever you want to use to describe that. So it's the 4th string and the 3rd string there, like 1, 2, and my thumb is obviously stopping right there. If that gives you a little bit of difficulty, or you're feeling like your thumb is inclined to go further downward and to strike more strings, like that, in this case, that wouldn't be a really bad thing because it's all a pleasant G sound and if you go down to the B string, it's part of the chord. So it's not going to offend anybody's sensibilities or make you sound bad if that happens, but you do want to work to avoid that happening. Also because as we get more into the folk blues and the country blues bag, we see that the strum is a recurring thing, and there are certain times in other tunes where you might want to strum and you really have to have the precision to just get 2 strings instead of 3. And so if this is tripping you up at all, what I would recommend is to just sit around and don't even worry about the melody. Again, we go back to this idea of just getting your thumb to be practiced so that it's independent and doing what it needs to do. If you're having any trouble with the strum and that's happening instead of that, then just sit around and practice slowly, and as long as it takes, it's all respectable. But as long as it does take, practice going slowly and getting your precision to only get a couple of strings there on the strum. Like you might practice, and you'll find that the slower you go, the more inclined on the strum it's going to be to have that noticeable delay between the 4th and the 3rd string. When you get it up to a performance tempo and you're just playing through the thing, you're going to find that it happens pretty quickly, and it sounds pretty much like you'd expect a strum to. Remember what I said on the audio, it's just like the flesh of your thumb is momentarily like a straight pick, and you're just moving downward in that motion. So break it down into small chunks. You might even practice that with the melody there, and you can see I'm articulating that with my 2nd finger on the right hand. But you could really use whatever finger. You could use the 1st finger. And again, I won't dive into too much more detail about this because it's all said on the audio lesson. But remember what we talked about regarding the right hand. There is a good amount in this music of room to just do what works right for you based on your individual preferences. This isn't classical guitar, and it's not a really complicated Chet thing where you have to use a certain fingering for like a 3-fingered roll or something like that. So back to the strum. You could just sit around and practice melody note and bass note, and then on beat 2 the strum. And just do that. And then add in the second half of measure 3, which is that. And again, you'll see that I'm still using my pinky there to get the melody up on top on the E string. Okay? And next comes the section that we talked about on the audio component where there is a break. We're talking about measure 4 in the transcription on the tablature. There's that break on beat 1, and you just let the guitar ring through, and that's where I'd recommended switching your left hand position. So let me give you a visual representation of that. Right there, switch to your 2nd finger there in the bass on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, and that's where we go, okay, which is going to prepare us for the 2nd line of the piece. And then, because measure 6 is right there, measure 6 there, where you see my 3rd finger is moving down into the 3rd fret of the 4th string, and I'm grabbing the melody up on top in the left hand with my pinky, again in the 3rd fret. And as we already know from seeing this and from what I said on the audio, if we didn't have the 2nd finger there on the 6th string by measure 6, we'd be in bad shape, because if you got the 3rd finger there, to get this note here, we'd either be using the pinky there, which sets us up for a real weird move like that, or you couldn't even do it that way, I don't think. I can't. I'd have to practice about 3 years, and right now my index is cramped. So, yeah, 2nd finger down there on the 6th string, 3rd finger there on the 4th string, and that frees us up to use our pinky in the 3rd fret like we're already so used to doing from the other chord shapes in the piece already so far. So actually I did just misplay that. I should have put this down on beat 2 instead of beat 4. So that's what we're talking about on the audio. I know that could have been a bit ambiguous when I was describing it rather than showing you, but I wanted that to be on the DVD as a visual aid there. And the other thing that I was saying regarding that section was that if this is in the left hand too much of a stretch, because I have somewhat long fingers on my left hand, but if yours are not quite as long and if it's too much of a stretch or it's uncomfortable, there in measure 5, to have that between the 2nd finger there and the 1st finger there, to say that a little more clearly, 2nd finger here on the 3rd fret 6th string, 1st finger here on the 1st fret of the 1st string. That's a little bit of a stretch. It's certainly a stretch if you hold it for more than a beat. You'll see that luckily in the tablature you don't have to put down your 1st finger there until the and of 4, and so that stretch really doesn't last long at all, and it lasts short enough that to my left hand and my fingers it doesn't feel uncomfortable. But if for you it is really uncomfortable and it's painful and it's just not happening, or it just sounds clumsy, and you're thinking that the way I'm teaching it is right for me but maybe not for everybody else, and you need to find an alternate fingering, this is where I was talking about the alternative on the audio component too. If you don't switch in measure 4 to the 2nd finger there in the bass, and you leave the 3rd down, then you need to switch here at the end of measure 5, so that by measure 6, which as we've already established, you absolutely need this 2nd finger here on the 6th string, just in order to get this G7. So that was kind of a mouthful and a lot of information in a short amount of time. Let me go back and slowly play that for you, the alternative fingering. I'm going to start at measure 1 and play through measure 6. And I'll show you slowly, playing it a bit slowly, how you might change the left-hand fingering if switching to this fingering in measure 4 just isn't working for you. If it's causing problems in measure 5 with that stretch, which is what we're talking about, obviously that's going to be more comfortable for you with the 3rd string, the 3rd finger there, and the 1st finger up here. So if this is what you'd like to maintain, check this out, and I'll play it quite slowly, just measures 1 through measure 6 here. So. And right there, you can see that if you do keep this finger down, then there is the one advantage of it does ring through a little bit more on beat 1 of measure 4, where you're just letting the guitar ring and you're not doing anything additional in your right hand. But I didn't mean to stop and make that point, but as I got there I thought that it was relevant enough that I wanted you to see that. So again, from measure 1 through measure 6, this time without me breaking it up. There. That's what I was talking about on the audio. If you're going to finger it like that, which is fine, just bear in mind that in about half a beat to a beat there on the beat 4 of measure 5, where you have this open D string, that's where you've got to lift up your 3rd finger, put your 2nd down, and then you'll be ready for the downbeat of measure 6, where that happens, this exact shape. Okay, so I'll play just measures 5 and 6 again, just isolated, so you can see exactly when I'm changing finger patterns there. You'll see in my case, and again this is because to my left hand that's not too difficult of a stretch, but you'll see there I actually switched from the 3rd to the 2nd in time to still have that going on where there's a little bit of a stretch. So if you're going to try to avoid that altogether, you're going to have to be really quick there in the left hand. But you can do it if that's a much better alternative. So just pick what works best for you. In my case, both feel fine and both work. But do bear in mind that sometimes what works slowly when you're practicing it, when you get it up to tempo, it might be a little more difficult. So if this works at a nice slow and even tempo, to switch there in half a beat or a beat, that's fine and well, but just remember that when you get it up to a performance tempo, your left hand is going to have to be a little bit faster. And to some extent that will naturally happen by just practicing it slowly and muscle memory. But just bear that in mind and do pick which one works best for you. Now the rest of this piece, there's not too much need for visual aid on it, but I'll just play it for you on the remainder of this DVD. So you've got the left and right hand positions, and again, if there's any confusion or additional questions, please just let me know and I'd be happy to explain. So here we go. I'll just play the whole tune through slowly and at a nice tempo that you can practice along with here, from measure 1 through the end and repeating the E7 section. So here we go. And there you'll see, again, I just move my third finger down one string and hit that nice C note on the last beat, beat 3 really, to give it that nice ending. But that's me, you know, as you play this tune, as your left and right hand become familiar with it, you'll gravitate to just the improvisation of a moment, and the way I play it today might be an entirely different way than the way that I would play it tomorrow. So that's the tune, and the only other thing that I might show you on the DVD is here on the F chord, and it's measure 11 and 12. This is what I'm talking about with the thumb. You'll see that my thumb, and I'll turn around and see if the camera gets this, but my thumb is always right about there on the guitar neck. It's never down here like a classical player would tell you, or like you'd be instructed to in a college classical program, which I did go through. But playing all other kinds of music, it's always right about there. It's very convenient, and it's ready to at any moment wrap around and grab a bass note. So there on the F, it's getting the bass note. Because I don't want to unnecessarily do that, a bar chord to me is much more uncomfortable than having to use my thumb. I just wrap it around, third finger there, second there, first finger here. It's really like a diagonal. And as I said on the audio, it's like you took an E chord and just move it up one fret and put your index down. So it's that shape with the thumb in the bass. And there's where I was talking about with hammering on with the pinky. So, because all your other fingers are spoken for, as we can see here. And then we just move our third finger up from the 4th string to the 6th. Second finger from the 2nd fret of the 3rd string to the 2nd fret of the 4th. So that's nice, just that motion there. The frets are the same, you just change strings. That's what's going on. And really, so much of playing guitar well is economy of motion and not doing things in the left hand that you don't have to, that make it unnecessarily difficult. You can see I can leave my first finger there in the 1st fret because it's already down for the F chord. I can leave it just, I'll use the term anchored. I can leave it anchored there, and then all I've got to do is move those two fingers, and I'm back to my old friend, the C chord. So that's the motion there. And you'll see again in measure, what is that? That's measure 14. On beat 4 you do get that dominant 7th note again. So I'm using my pinky, as we've talked about. Now, in case there's any question or wonder, by the way, about why it is that I'm using my 3rd finger here on the 6th string for this G7, and I wasn't earlier, and we made such a big deal about needing this fingering with the 2nd finger on the 6th in measure 6. In case there's any question about that, the answer lies in what's going on above in the melody. And in measure 6, it's we have to get this 3rd fret in the melody, which means we have to have our left hand have a finger available for that. But in measure 14, it's all open strings, and so that affords us the opportunity to just leave our 3rd finger down as usual, remembering what I said earlier about economy of motion, and just put the pinky down, because the second and the 3rd string are both open. Then we still leave the 3rd down, our pinky moves back to our 2nd finger, 1 fret below, pinky on 3rd fret, 2nd finger on 2nd fret, when we move back to the C chord in measure 15. So it's that motion, and we just finger pick the C chord out. So those are the right and left hand things that I would just encourage you to bear in mind, and let me just play it one more time at tempo for you. And thanks again for taking the journey with me, and for this, watching this video and paying attention to the audio component and everything. As I said, I know that there's a lot going on here, so just let me know if there's any other way I can help, and keep practicing. So here's the tune at tempo.